Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Tonight, in a last-minute change of subject, we're switching to the big news from Pakistan. Masood Azhar, his brother Rauf Asghar and his brother-in-law Ashfaq Ahmed have been arrested. At first sight, this is a major and decisive step taken by Pakistan in response to the Pathankot terror attack. It suggests almost a sea change in Islamabad's response to the terror India faces from that country. So now, will the Foreign Secretary talks go ahead? And are we also at the brink of a new relationship between the two countries? Or is that still an unwarranted conclusion? Joining me is a collection of top guests from both countries. From India, we have former top ambassadors. They are Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, Rakesh Sood and Kamal Sibal. They'll all be joining us during the duration of this program. We also have former Special Secretary in charge of Intelligence, Rana Banerjee, and the founding editor of TheWire.in, Siddharth Varadarajan. And from Islamabad, two of that country's most illustrious former High Commissioners to India, Aziz Ahmed Khan and his predecessor, Ashraf Qazi. Siddharth Varadarajan, let me start with you. For most people, the news that Masood Azhar, his brother Rauf Asghar and his brother-in-law Ashfaq Ahmed have been arrested is fairly dramatic. It's clearly what India would have wanted, but most Indians had come to convince themselves it wasn't going to happen because of the relationship these gentlemen have with the Pakistan Army and the military establishment. Now that it's reported that they've been taken into protective custody, how significant a development is this from India's point of view?
No, I think it's very significant. I would say it borders on the dramatic for the simple reason that this action, although not unprecedented in the sense that in the past Pakistan has arrested people involved in terror acts and senior people like from the Lashkar-e-Taiba, for example, after Zakir Rahman Lakhvi is an example, only to have the cases sort of peter out. But I think the action taken this time against Masood Azhar, to the extent to which it shows a degree of responding to India's concerns, I think is very, very welcome. It's dramatic, and it also paves the way, quite frankly, for the Foreign Secretary level talks to get underway now. And I think that I would expect some kind of an announcement on the dialogue process, the Foreign Secretary traveling to Islamabad, perhaps not immediately on the 15th if there's not enough time, but maybe 1 or 2 days later. But I think the path has been cleared for that, because this really shows some degree, a change in the Pakistani attitude and a greater willingness for them to engage with our concerns.
Ashraf Qazi, in an article that you wrote in the Pakistani newspaper The Dawn yesterday, you expressed a certain measure of skepticism about whether the Pakistan Army was fully supportive of the visit that India's Prime Minister Mr. Modi paid to Lahore. You wondered how they viewed it. You also weren't sure whether the army was fully behind the attempts that Mr. Nawaz Sharif is making to tackle the Pathankot terror. Now that Masood Azhar, his brother and brother-in-law have been taken into protective custody, do you think those doubts are dispelled? Does this show and prove that Raheel Sharif and the ISI chief are fully behind Nawaz Sharif in tackling Pathankot?
I dearly hope so, and it's very possible. You know, it doesn't mean that if there's been a situation in the past, it must continue forever. I think we've seen policies of the past not working, and I'm looking forward to us building upon these positive developments. Yes, I am optimistic, and when I wrote those about, the article, of course I meant every single word, but also along with it, one hopes that, and if you read the article carefully, it does express the hope that we will move away from policies that haven't worked, which have brought us harm rather than any advantage, and hopefully we are moving, not as a result of my article, but merely because good sense and experience teaches people things, and we're moving hopefully in the right direction. It's early days, but I think we must not underestimate the significance of the moves that have been taken by the government of Pakistan, with both the civilians and the military on board, as it seems.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, one small but for some important question is, what does the phrase protective custody mean? Is it similar and akin to arrest? Is it something short of arrest? How would you explain that phrase protective custody, which is what has happened to these three gentlemen, to an Indian audience?
Not a lawyer. I mean, my knowledge of law is rather limited, But I think in order to arrest some person, you have to have an FIR and you have to have a certain accusation. Protective custody means that they have been taken into custody in order for interrogation, in order to probe the case, and once the interrogation is over, and once a conclusion is drawn, if there is enough evidence that they were involved in that, then there would be an FIR and they would be formally arrested. And if it is not proven, then they would probably be released. That is how I understand it.
Kamal Sibal, you've traditionally always been very skeptical of any action that Pakistan would take. You've usually argued that what they do is cosmetic. It tends to be more for appearance than actual action. Now that the head of the JeM, Maulana Masood Azhar, his brother Rauf Asghar and his brother-in-law Ashfaq Ahmed have been taken into protective custody, are you surprised by the decisiveness with which Pakistan has acted, or are you still going to say this is only cosmetic?
No, I am surprised and happily surprised. I didn't expect the Pakistani side to take such a prompt action. Earlier there was news that they had arrested some operatives of the Jaish-e-Mohammad at low level, but arresting or detaining the head of the organization, that is a major step of instilling confidence on our side and clears the road for the foreign secretary level talks.
This is very important. You believe this clears the road for the foreign secretary level talks. You're saying that as a former foreign secretary.
Yes, indeed, because this is the maximum one could have expected from Pakistan at this stage. And arresting or detaining Maulana Masood Azhar is a major step by them. Though, of course, I would say that in the past they have arrested or detained Hafiz several times. They detained Lakhvi. But the impact on the ground situation with regard to the operations of these organizations against us. So that concern will remain. But in terms of a step that they have taken and a gesture that they have made in response to the leads we have given, I think this is a concrete and confidence-building step. And therefore, I think it does clear the road.
This is very important, Kamal Sibal, because you're not usually one of those who's soft and liberal on Pakistan. You tend to be a hardliner. Do you also now believe that the foreign secretary talks should happen on the 15th, in other words, day after tomorrow, as originally scheduled, that there is now no grounds for delaying it or postponing it?
No, that is a logistical issue, because if the foreign secretary can reach, fine. But you see, the foreign secretary has to take instructions from the CCS and this and that, and therefore it is possible that it could get delayed by a day or two or whatever, but that's purely logistical. But in terms of holding these talks, whether on 15th or 16th, 17th or whatever, I think the Pakistani side has done has taken sufficiently important steps for the moment to allow the two sides to engage and begin discussions on how this comprehensive dialogue has to be structured.
Rakesh Sood, I want to bring you in on that key point. This is such an important issue. I want to begin by asking if you agree with Kamal Sibal, a former foreign secretary and a gentleman who's known for his hardline position on Pakistan, when he says the way is now cleared for the foreign secretary level talks. He believes that the arrest of Masood Azhar and the other two is a dramatic gesture by Pakistan, and this is a clear indication that Pakistan has acted decisively, and therefore the foreign secretary talks should and must go ahead. First of all, do you agree with that?
I agree that the foreign secretary talks should go ahead, whether on the 15th or, as Mr. Sibal said, maybe a day or two later. But then this is certainly a dramatic step. How decisive it would be will depend upon how the preventive custody progresses and what kind of interrogation progresses. We've also heard reports that Pakistan would like to send an investigating team to India to actually work with the people investigating the Pathankot attack. And at the same time, we have to see what the response to that is. So we need to wait and see how decisive this action is, but it is certainly dramatic. And naturally, the foreign secretary talks was the beginning of a process. So I think one round of foreign secretary level talks taking place is basically the beginning of a process, and that should move forward because there is a certain amount of good faith that has been demonstrated.
Let me point out for a moment, for the sake of accuracy, that in fact it's not just reports about Pakistan wanting to send a team to investigate in Pathankot. That is part of a formal statement issued by Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's office earlier this evening. He wants to do so in consultation with the Indians. So the people that have to clear it are actually the Indian side. But to come back, Rakesh Sood, to this question of whether the Foreign Secretary talks can happen on the 15th, there was no decision taken to call them off. And the Foreign Secretary is back from Colombo. At the moment, he's meeting the Foreign Minister, Sushma Swaraj, in her residence. Presumably, therefore, the Foreign Secretary had at the back of his mind preparations to go across to Islamabad on Friday if need be. Now that the way is cleared, what logistical problem would stop him doing so?
I don't think there are logistical problems. I think that it's just a question of making sure that he has the right set of instructions in view of these fast-changing developments, because whatever preparatory work would have been done, it would need to be updated. In other words, when he goes to Islamabad for talks, notwithstanding any communication that may be taking place between the two national security advisors, it is almost a given that the foreign secretaries will also discuss cooperation on this particular issue. It will be part of the agenda of the foreign secretary level talks.
What you're hearing, Aziz Ahmed Khan, both from Kamal Sibal, a former foreign secretary, and from Rakesh Sood, the former ambassador to Afghanistan, Nepal and France, is that the way is completely cleared for the Foreign Secretary talks to happen. Your country has acted decisively and promptly as Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif promised. They've done something that most people in India thought they would not do. They've arrested Maulana Masood Azhar. But for purely logistical reasons, the Foreign Secretary talks may have to be delayed for 24 hours or a day or two so that the present Foreign Secretary can be fully briefed and take instructions before he comes. In other words, between now and Friday, there may not be time for that. How would Pakistan respond to a brief delay of a day or two if that becomes necessary? And I underline that word if.
Well, first of all, I do not think that the logistical issue would be such a problem. A special plane can be put at his disposal and he can fly over to Islamabad. Number two, considering the way the foreign ministries of our two countries work, the preparatory work goes on, and this is a continuous process that has been going on since a very long time, and we know what are the issues to be discussed. It is to discuss the framework of the new dialogue process, and I'm sure that preparatory work must have been done. So I do not think that it would be necessary to postpone the talks, but should it be necessary for logistical reasons, then perhaps an announcement right away that the talks will be held and that the date instead of 15th would be 16th or 17th or whatever, but soon thereafter should be all right. But I still feel that the date of 15th can be maintained very easily.
Sarfraz Rajan, I want to bring you in on this point about logistical possible delays, assuming that they could happen. When the Foreign Secretary visited Male and Colombo, and he's just back from Colombo, the Foreign Office had let it be known, and the Hindu newspaper reported it, that this was not in any way going to stop him going if he needed to go to Pakistan on the 15th, which clearly means that he was prepared to come back from Colombo on Wednesday evening, and if the passage to Islamabad was cleared, leave on Friday or Thursday evening. Now that it seems the passage is cleared, why suddenly should there be logistical problems? Because he was prepared to go. The Foreign Office was saying he's going to Mali and Colombo wouldn't stop him doing so. So surely now there shouldn't be any logistical problem from him actually doing that.
I don't think there are any logistical issues, Karan. It's possible that the Indian side, because it has been preoccupied with Pathankot and its aftermath from pretty much January 1st, January 2nd onwards, may want a couple of days more to prepare its brief, to work on the kind of proposals that the Foreign Secretary will take with them. But in the event that a postponement of a day or two is deemed necessary, I would imagine that the proper thing to do is for the Prime Minister to actually talk to Nawaz Sharif, because Nawaz Sharif, let's not forget, has invested some personal political capital in this move against the Jaish-e-Mohammad. The meeting he chaired today, as the Prime Minister's Office of Pakistan statement makes clear, had the army chief present and pretty much everybody. And this is a decision that was collectively taken, but obviously Nawaz Sharif's personal political involvement is apparent. just as Mr. Modi's personal political capital was involved in his visit to Lahore on December 25th. So I would say a phone call between the two prime ministers where, if a delay is deemed necessary, this is communicated and the concurrence or consent of Pakistan is sought, and the public messaging is done very carefully so that there is no uncertainty about why a delay, if at all it has to take place, why this delay is on. It's not because India is unhappy or dissatisfied, but because of genuine unavoidable circumstances. I think that's the way that this has to be played.
Kamal Sibal, I want to come to you, assuming you're still with me. Are you there, Kamal Sibal?
I am.
Lovely. You know, these talks between the two foreign secretaries are not actually intended and were never supposed to be substantive talks. They were simply going to meet to work out the modalities and the schedule for what's now called the comprehensive bilateral dialogue. For that, there's not an awful lot of briefing that the Foreign Secretary needs that he hasn't already got. And given, secondly, that the Foreign Office was officially saying that he's going to Colombo and Male wouldn't impede him going to Islamabad if need be, what are the briefings, what is the clearance he needs? Surely, after the enormous capital invested by Nawaz Sharif to ensure that the road was cleared, decisive action was taken, it would be very strange for India not to stick to the deadline and schedule, even though there are still 36 hours to do so.
You know, I'll put it differently, which is that although we all know that January 15 was the date when the FS level talks were to be held, but there has been no formal announcement of January 15 as the decided dates by both sides.
Well, I think Pakistan's announced it, India hasn't. Yeah. But Pakistan has announced it.
See, Pakistan has announced this, he has mentioned it, but India has not said that, yes, this has been an agreed date. Obviously, this was a proposal from the Pakistani side.
But aren't you suddenly becoming very technical at a time when, in fact, we need to respond to the gesture, which you call dramatic and almost game-changing, with something similar ourselves?
You know, what I mean is that this is not a major issue at all. And if for any reason there has to be a slight delay for logistical or for briefing reasons, I don't think on the Pakistani side there will be scope for any misunderstanding on this issue. But if he can make it on the 15th, as he's been saying that he's ready to go there at short notice, fine, let him go there, because the basis for the resumption of talks has been created. And it would be very difficult for us, for any reason, whatever, to now say that Pakistan has not done enough. In fact, the reality is that this attack took place. We gave them leads. We told them that Jaish-e-Mohammad was involved. They have implicitly accepted that there is a connection, and they have detained the leader of the organization. I think under the circumstances, as I said, this was the maximum that we could expect from them. And therefore, we would have no ground now to say that we're not going to have FS level talks. That is one. But I must also add the caveat which I mentioned earlier, that Pakistan has been detaining Hafiz Saeed and Lakhvi and all others. This does not address the core issue, but it's a good first step.
All right, and I should simply point out, in fairness, that even people like Swami Asimanand, who was arrested in the Samjhauta Express case, did at one point of time also get bail. Getting bail, which is what happened to Hafiz Saeed or Lakhvi, is not unusual in our judicial systems. It's happened in our case, it's happened in their case. Let me bring in Ashraf Qazi at this point. Mr. Qazi, we don't have Mr. Qazi at the moment. Hopefully, we'll get back to him. Let's try his landline. That's a message from my producer. Please try his landline. Aziz Ahmed Khan, give our audience a sense of how difficult a decision this would have been for the civilian and military halves of your establishment in Pakistan to take. How difficult would it have been? Or how simple and easy, for that matter?
Well, I think it is a bold decision, and it is a sincere step that Pakistan has taken to prove to you its bona fides that Pakistan has been maintaining, that it would not allow its soil to be used for terrorism against any country. Now, you have provided certain evidence. I do not know what is the nature of that evidence. Apparently, the two numbers that were provided, telephone numbers that were provided, have not been registered in Pakistan, and we have a very strict registration system based on biometric things. I have also lost one number because I didn't go for registration, one of my mobile numbers. So So whatever information that India has given, Pakistan has taken it seriously and is doing the interrogation of these persons in this regard. At the same time, Pakistan has requested for an investigation team to go to India for further investigation and exchange of views. And I think this is an opportunity where both countries should sincerely try to resolve the issue and try to move forward so that this menace of terrorism can be fought jointly. It is important for us to do that, and I think that I think both sides have taken very good steps so far.
Let me go very quickly, Rakesh Sood, to you on this question. What message do you get, and how do you interpret and understand the fact that Pakistan now, clearly with the support and cooperation of the army in the shape and form of Raheel Sharif and the ISI, has arrested Azhar, his brother Rauf Asghar, his brother-in-law Ahmad Ashfaq? What message does that convey to us about the way Pakistan as a whole, civilian and military combined, is responding?
Karan, I think this is a very positive message that we are getting at this time, because I think the first important signal that came was that, unlike in previous occasions, Pakistan was not in denial mode. Pakistan did not say, oh, these are not Pakistanis, or it could not have happened and this is all a fabrication. Secondly, the January 8th statement that came out after the Corps Commanders Conference, in which the Pakistani military reiterated their commitment that they would not allow Pakistani soil to be used for terror anywhere, was an important reaffirmation. And then, of course, we saw Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif take his meetings with all the Army Chief, General Raheel Sharif and others present. And so, in a sense, this has been moving positively, and it is an extremely positive signal. However, I would just like to add one word of caution. I think we should refrain from saying, oh, something has happened under Indian pressure or something, because that is not a good way to put it. I think we should certainly congratulate the Pakistanis. We should say, well, we are happy that you've taken this first step, and we hope that this will move forward. And I think, as I said earlier, the Foreign Secretary level talks is not a one-shot exercise. It is going to be the beginning of a process. Absolutely. It is not the end of a process.
Can I very quickly, on this dramatic step that Pakistan has taken, which both you and Kamal Sibal believe is the most we could have expected, and they've done it with alacrity and they've done it decisively, can I ask, does it also now go on to suggest something akin to a sea change in the way Pakistan responds to the terror we face from that country? Up till now, their response to earlier ones, particularly 26/11, was very different. So does this suggest what I call almost a sea change in their attitude to the terror we face from within Pakistan?
I think there is a key difference in terms of the fact that this time channels of communication that worked between the two national security advisors worked effectively, and therefore there was no knee-jerk denial of what India was alleging, that these were Jaish-e-Mohammad trained terrorists and so on. So I think that is where the key difference was, because even last year at Gurdaspur and Udhampur, when we saw these kind of attacks, we didn't get this kind of acknowledgement or even saying, all right, it is worth looking into. So this time the reaction moved in a moved slightly differently. So I think the communication links worked much better. Okay. There was a better give and take, and which is what is critical to maintain in terms of also ensuring that we don't start, we don't get into this thing that, oh, Indian pressure has worked kind of thing, because I think that is not what is desirable at this stage.
Siddharth Varadarajan, how much of the development that's happened today, which everyone accepts is decisive, it's dramatic, it's all that India could have expected, how much of that is a direct result of Mr. Modi's surprise Christmas visit to Lahore to greet Nawaz Sharif? Does this flow directly from it? And does it also suggest that there is now a bond of mutual faith and trust between the two prime ministers that's propelling the relationship?
I think undoubtedly, and I think it would be churlish to deny the importance of that visit which Mr. Modi paid to Lahore, quite frankly, because what he demonstrated was that, look, I am willing to embrace the political risks that come with reaching out in this manner. He did so in full knowledge of the fact that terrorist groups continue to operate in Pakistan with the patronage of elements of the Pakistani state. But he said the message he was sending was that, look, I'm committed to dialogue after, having tried and tested different, on again, off again talks, but I'm now committed to the dialogue. So I think that having gone the extra mile and shown his commitment, his gesture has been reciprocated by Nawaz Sharif in this way. And I quite agree with Ambassador Sood that any attempt to blow one's trumpet now and say this is the result of Indian pressure it will all be counterproductive. I think that it takes two hands to clap, quite frankly, and both leaders are personally committed now to making this dialogue process successful. And that's where things are, quite frankly.
All right.
There's still an enormous distance to travel.
Absolutely.
But I think the stage has been set now for something quite positive.
Very quickly, I want to go to Pakistan before I take a break, and I'm not going to bring up the question of this has happened under pressure from India. That's not a relevant issue today at all. That is very possibly a spoiler. But what I want to ask you, Aziz Ahmed Khan, is what role did the telephone call that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif received from Secretary of State Kerry play? Has there been a certain pressure or nudge or persuasion from Washington that perhaps has helped?
No, I think that would be unfair to say. The Pakistan, United States routinely consult each other over important matters. But just look at the past history of the way Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has taken steps since he took over as Prime Minister for improvement of relations with India. His going to India for Prime Minister Modi's inauguration and subsequent meetings, he has shown all keenness to improve relations with India. And this time the difference is, and happily, India, Prime Minister Modi has also reciprocated those gestures, and both leaders have developed some kind of an understanding, and they are moving in the right direction. They are taking the course of relationship in the right direction. And I think let us be fair to both sides, that both the leaders are acting like leaders, and they have realized that the two countries need to resolve all issues through peaceful means, through dialogue process, and that should address concerns of each other. And that is the spirit in which I think Pakistan is acting, and that is why, as Rakesh also pointed out, the Corps Commanders meeting also issued a statement that terrorism will not be, Pakistani soil will not be allowed for acts of terrorism against any country. And Pakistan has been saying this consistently for quite some time and have been taking steps. Of course, there have been, may not have been as rapid as one expects it to be, but then this is a very complicated and difficult issue.
Welcome back. You're watching To The Point on a dramatic night when Pakistan has announced through their media, at any rate, but as yet it has to, of course, I know, still be officially conveyed to the Indian government that Masood Azhar, the head of the JEM, has been arrested. So too his brother Rauf Asghar, as well as his brother-in-law Ashfaq Ahmed. And the key question we turn to now in part 2 of this discussion is, are we on the brink of a potentially different, very different relationship between India and Pakistan? Or is that an unwarranted conclusion? Siddharth Varadarajan, very quickly, what's your answer to that question? Are we on the brink of a potentially different relationship between the two countries?
I'd say not yet. I think, in fact, we're probably still some distance away. It's essential that the dialogue process be insulated from the act of terrorist groups and the response of the Pakistani side. I think first the response of India and the response of the Pakistani side to Pathankot in many ways shows that we have managed to overcome some of the problems of the last decade where dialogue inevitably became a casualty. So I think this is a very, very good first step, but it's essential to find ways to insulate the dialogue process so that each incident does not trigger a crisis, does not trigger a disruption. Beyond that, the end point is very clear on Kashmir, on Siachen. We know, both sides know what has to be done. It's a question of trust. It's a question of, willing to go the extra mile for the other side. We're not quite there yet, but I'm sure if this process continues and if both leaders remain personally invested, we could very well get there in a reasonable amount of time.
Aziz Ahmed Khan, when I asked Siddharth Varadarajan, are we possibly on the brink of a new and dramatically different relationship between the two countries, his answer was no, we're not there as yet. As a former High Commissioner to India, who knows both this country and knows your own country, of course, extremely well, what more is needed before we get to the brink of a new relationship? And remember, I'm only talking about the brink of a new relationship.
We are on the brink of a new relationship. But at the same time, I would like to point out that these disruptive acts, if we can overcome the difficulty that these disruptive acts put in the way of improving our relationship, that is something that the leadership has to show the resolve that they would not be. If you recall, in 2005, when President Musharraf visited Delhi, the joint statement had reiterated that acts of terrorism will not be allowed to impede the dialogue process. But unfortunately, that resolve was broken and the dialogue process got impeded. There are actors, there are people who would be trying to disrupt this process and who would not like this process to carry on, and we have to show that kind of leadership and that kind of resolve that should such an incident, unfortunately, and I hope it does not, but if should it happen, that the dialogue process should continue, because it's only through dialogue that we can resolve all issues. And I think so much has already been covered in the last 6, 7, 8 years that we can move very rapidly now in resolving all issues.
Rakesh, so the big concern is the one that you heard Aziz Ahmed Khan refer to, that there are bound to be attempts made by those who want to disrupt the relationship, who tried in Pathankot and now it seems failed to disrupt it, but they're bound to try again and again and again. How easy or how difficult will it be for the two prime ministers to ensure that they failed the first time, they will always fail in disrupting the relationship each time they try?
Well, as we've seen this time, Pathankot could have been a disruption in what was intended as the first step of the Foreign Secretary level talks. However, Pathankot, we assume, has failed because of the fact that certain channels of communication between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif worked well. Channels of communication between the two national security advisors worked well, and we also saw that there was a certain coherence in terms of the action that was taken by Pakistan in backing up whatever understandings or commitments or promises they made at different levels to Prime Minister Modi and to National Security Advisor Doval. So I think what is important is that even if there are such attacks in future, if these channels of communication remain intact, then to that extent, the dialogue process does get a certain degree of protection in terms of being able to move forward. But the key will always remain, because these are issues which are not easy to turn away from. So in that sense, as I said, even in this case, what we are seeing is preventive custody, which is a very good first step. We have to see how the investigation progresses. We have to see when and if the Pakistani team comes here, and what kind of evidence they're able to take, how quickly judicial move forward on something like this. We have seen that Pakistan has set up special courts. And so we will wait and see how all of this turns out. But the key in insulating the dialogue process is to have good, effective channels of communication.
Sarajan, as you agreed a moment ago, this is a direct outcome of the two prime ministers, how shall I put it, investing in each other. It began with Mr. Modi taking a very bold gamble, and it's now resulted in Mr. Nawaz Sharif returning the favor, so to speak, with a dramatic gesture that no one thought was likely ever to happen, of arresting Azhar, his brother and brother-in-law. If the two prime ministers remain committed to what they started, and clearly they must both, because they both now have stakes in it, do you think that these two, assuming they stay in office, can actually change the relationship because they now have the strength and the wisdom perhaps to help each other help themselves?
They could, because as individuals they are both powerful. They have, I think Mr. Modi of course is more powerful domestically than Nawaz Sharif is in Pakistan, but Nawaz Sharif has certainly the political support, and truth be told, in Pakistan, even if his party does not have the kind of supermajority that the BJP has here, there is, broadly speaking, a consensus among mainstream political parties in Pakistan of the need to improve relations with India. So I think that the stage is set, and I think a lot depends on the Pakistani military also deciding to that the time has now come to make that final, and irrevocable course correction by severing all links and connections with terrorist groups.
Okay.
Certainly the all allies and friends of Pakistan, such as the United States and even China, will be counseling them to do that. So I think that if Nawaz Sharif can deliver on India's concerns, and Modi finds a way to move ahead on issues like trade, as well as to have, quite frankly, bring the dialogue on Kashmir, Siachen, Sir Creek back onto the front burner, this can create the possibility for forward movement, undoubtedly.
Very, very quickly, Aziz Ahmed Khan, because time is always our enemy. Do you think also there is now an occasion, perhaps even a need, for the skepticism that exists across the board in India regarding your army to be rethought? That perhaps we should rethink our conviction in India that your army is against a good relationship with Delhi? Has the time come to rethink that attitude?
So absolutely. And what better argument can you give that I just quoted, and Rakesh also quoted about, talked about the corps commanders after their meeting declaring that there is zero tolerance for terrorism, that the Pakistani soil will not be allowed to have acts of terrorism against any country. So definitely, I think this is a new army, this is a new attitude, and you need to drop that cynicism that prevails there.
Let me give you the last word, Rakesh Sood. You've heard Aziz Ahmed Khan, but then he's likely, as a Pakistani, to say this, that this is a new army and a new attitude. Do we tonight have some small reason to perhaps half accept what she's saying and then explore further to see whether it's the truth? Or is that jumping the gun?
Well, Karan, as Aziz himself said, General Musharraf, when he received Prime Minister Vajpayee in January 2004 for the SARC summit, he made more or less the same commitment, but then we saw 26/11. But nonetheless, I don't think there is any advantage to be gained in going back, because I remember the kind of optimism that existed when Prime Minister Vajpayee went to Lahore in 1999 February, and we saw what happened. I think we still need to have an open mind. Things change, thinking changes, and we have a new set of leaders, and most important, we see a degree of policy coherence between Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and the Army Chief.
That's such an important thing to say when you end this show. Things change, thinkings change, we have new leaders, and we have a new policy coherence, both in Islamabad as well as in Delhi. Let's hope, in fact, that some of the high expectations, bordering possibly even on a slight hint of euphoria this evening, don't turn out to be exaggerated and unwarranted. Let's hope that what we're seeing is the beginning of a new relationship. It won't be easy. It will, in fact, be very difficult. There will be lots of U-turns. There will be lots of zigzags, and lots of moments when the two countries will be tested, often by terror, in fact, frequently by terror. But let's hope what started today continues, gains momentum, and leads to the required logical conclusion. My thanks to all my guests for joining me, and if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye, good night.
Ansari, who was there with many other friends trying to take a selfie. The latest that we are hearing is that Ramesh Walunja's body has been found at Mahim near Dharavi.